Hello. Thank you for joining me. I just had a little bit of fun with the flag because it was round the wrong way. Something to do with mirror image. Anyway, really nice to see you. Thank you ever so much for joining me. Just a quick introduction. My name is Laura. I am one of the directors of Memory Matters Southwest, which I run with my wonderful sister-in-law, Kate. We are both a couple of nurses who decided in our infinite wisdom a few years ago to start an organisation which was founded to support people who are living with dementia in the community. Now, an offshoot of that is that we work on prevention as well. So we work also with people who are perhaps getting a little older, coming up to retirement, or maybe retired and worried about their memory, or thinking about what they can do to make a difference in terms of their brain health. And so I've been working for the last few months on a course called the Brain Fitness Formula, which is all about supporting people to get healthy when it comes to their brains. And so this webinar today is all about brain health. So I'm gonna leave it, should I leave it a little minute so some more people can join? It is 1 minute past. I did say that I would start at 3 o'clock, so I think what I'll do is I will crack on. Now, if you want to comment during this, you'll see that there's some discuss comments which you should be able to see underneath, where I've just written 5 minutes to go. If I write hello, and then you can say, I can't spell hello, and then in there you can comment if you need to. If you want to ask any questions, I will keep an eye on that for the whole time. And just find my screen. Okay, fantastic. Right, so you are with me today because we're going to be looking at 6 habits that you can embed in your life today, right now, and make a really big difference in reducing your chances of getting dementia. So the first thing that I need to say is that dementia is not an inevitable part of aging. And it's something that people ask all the time is, well, am I just going to get dementia? Well, probably not, but it's possible. There are things that we can do to reduce your chances of getting dementia. And those are things that are good for our bodies as well as our brains. And we're going to go into that with these 6 habits. If you're worried about your memory in any way, shape or form, if your difficulties with your memory are causing you to feel concerned, or they are affecting your everyday life, then you need to go and see a GP. It's really, really important. And a lot of people won't go because they're worried about it. There's many, many reasons why people have memory difficulties, and not all of them are to do with dementia at all. You can have terrible memory due to infection or due to imbalances. So it's really worth going to check that out. Now, if you're not concerned about your memory, but you want to know what to do, you're in the right place. So the first habit of the 6 habits is good sleep. Sleep is really, really important when it comes to our brain. When we sleep, this is the time that our brain is regenerating. This is the time that your new connections are forming in your brain. So although you may be asleep, your brain certainly isn't. It's very busy doing the things it needs to do. Now, if I'm honest, it's really quite complicated. So the connection between learning and memory are complex, and even the scientists are out on this one. So there is some studies that have been done in both animals and humans which show that quantity and quality of sleep have a profound impact on learning and memory. Now, that is the little bit that we're going to use today because I think that that's really important. There was some other experiments that they did on animals, which have caused scientists to go either way in terms of how important it is in terms of memories and laying down memories. But if we're just looking at brain function, then sleep is really, really important. So how can you get good sleep? bedtime routine is really, really important. So doing the same thing every time, go to bed at the same time, ban things like televisions, phones, computers, all those things from your bedroom. Your bedroom should be this sanctuary, this place that you curl up like a cat and go to sleep in. Practice mindfulness before bed if you can, or meditations. That's really getting rid of all those thoughts, or not allowing thoughts to come into your brain. This will be great in terms of getting rid of worries, because one of the things that people tell me is that they don't sleep well because that's the time that they worry about things, or they start to think about things that they haven't done that day. That's not the time to be thinking about those things. Have a notebook by your bed, so if you do have sudden thoughts of things that you really can't forget, write them down, but then put them away for the night. Avoid things like caffeine, and do remember that chocolate has caffeine in it, hidden away. Nicotine, alcohol, all those things are not good for you just before you go to bed. So try and leave an hour before doing any of those things before you go to bed. So that's habit number 1, is good sleep. The second one is exercise. Now, what's really exciting about this is that there is such a lot of evidence around exercise and the brain. Now, there's been various studies that show moving more decreases risk of you developing dementia. And the other thing is that even if you do have dementia, that actually exercising slows the progress of dementia. So, and there's so much evidence base to this one that you cannot argue with it. So if you're not moving now, you need to get moving. So how that happens is obviously that the blood is oxygenated and goes to your brain. That's exactly what you need, is oxygenated blood running around your brain. So how can you do that? All sorts of ways, I'm sure. Joining a walking group, which is sociable as well. Break up those periods of sitting. So if you find that you're sitting for long periods of time, get up and walk around and move. Actually sitting down for long periods of time is not good for you. It's never too late to start. So even if you hardly do any exercise right now, you can start small and build up. So if you at the moment don't really walk further than around your garden, perhaps you could make it to go and get the newspaper when you would usually drive. Make it achievable. The worst thing is to say, right, I'm going to run a marathon in a couple of weeks' time. It's not going to work. Also think about balance and coordination. That's really important and very good for your brain as well. So things like yoga, anything that gets you balancing, even standing on one leg just for the fun of it, good for your brain. Now it's recommended, and I take my recommendations from the UK's NHS, it's recommended 150 minutes of moderate aerobic exercise a day. So when we talk about moderate aerobic exercise, we're talking about things like walking or cycling. Now, you can do less time, but do more vigorous exercise. So 75 minutes of vigorous exercise, vigorous activity, like running or playing tennis, singles tennis, not doubles. Doubles doesn't count. You stand around a bit more. Or, of course, you can mix a bit of both. But what's really important to remember is that 1 minute of moderate exercise is equivalent to 2 minutes of vigorous exercise. So if you're doing vigorous exercise, you can do less. So that's good. And there's also evidence to show that the vigorous exercise, short bouts of vigorous exercise actually is really, really good for us. So it doesn't matter how you do it, to be honest, but you need to be moving. So that's the second habit, is to exercise your body. And in doing so, you will be exercising your brain. And that leads me on to number 3, which is exercising your brain. Now, this is the bread and butter of Memory Matters. This is what we do, brain exercises all day long. So I've got a huge list here, and I won't have time to go over all of them. But firstly, let's look at why we need to exercise our brains. So we know that the brain has something called neuroplasticity. Now, that's the ability to grow new neurons. Now, years ago, they didn't think that that was possible. They thought that you were born with your 100 billion nerve cells. That's mind-blowing that we have that many. And that as you got older, that these brain cells would would die off. And I'm sure certainly when I was a child, I was told if you bang your head, you'd lose some brain cells. Well, that might be true, but you can grow new neurons because of this neuroplasticity. So in doing so, that whole idea of use it or lose it makes so much sense. So you need to be using your brain. You need to be doing all sorts of different things with your brain to create different pathways in your mind. So I always use the tree analogy. So imagine that your neurons are trees. Imagine that you've got a forest of trees in your brain. By using not losing, it's like you're planting trees all the time. So you're growing these new neurons. So although our thinking becomes slower as we get older, by exercising it, we can be ahead of the curve. So how can you do that? So many ways. Now, some people love doing crosswords, and that's fantastic. If you love doing crosswords, do them. But be aware that if you're only doing crosswords, then you are only creating the same, you're only going down the same path again and again. So you need to be doing lots of different variety if you possibly can. So you've probably heard that learning an instrument is a really great thing to do for your brain. Now, that might seem like a huge thing. Perhaps you're not going to be performing sometime soon with your new instrument, but you can certainly have a go at the keyboard and learn a tune, or have a go at a violin or something. All of that stuff is really good. You don't have to be perfect at it, but just learning it or going through the process of learning is really good for your brain. Use your imagination as well. So if you've got grandchildren or children, make up stories and just use your mind to go through these stories, and you'll get better and better at it as you go. But if you're not used to using your imagination, then it takes practice. Do lots of estimating. So if you've ever got time on your hands, perhaps you're waiting in a waiting room, or we'd spend a lot of time waiting, I think, waiting for buses, waiting for appointments. That is a really good time to stimulate your brain. So looking at patterns on the wallpaper and trying to work out how many repeats there are, or thinking about the ceiling tiles and trying to work out how many ceiling tiles there are in a room, or perhaps you can estimate the people if you're in a really crowded space, or the numbers of chairs, or the numbers of chair legs. All of these things are really good for your brain. Keep curious, ask people questions, even if you're a little bit shy. It's really good to be curious and ask different questions and continue to keep learning. Open your mind to learn new things. What else could I tell you? Switch off one of your senses. That's a great thing to do. So whether that's closing your eyes and just using touch, perhaps you can find your way around your house just using touch, or be very careful not to fall. Also, you can put things in a pillowcase and close your eyes and see if you can work out what it is. If you do this with someone else, it can be lots of fun, but you have to trust them, or you don't want them putting horrible things in the pillowcase. What I will say, because I could go on forever and ever about this, because this is what we do, but what I will say is do like our Memory Matters Southwest Facebook page, and on there you will see that there's a group link to that, which is called the Brain Fitness Workouts and Giggles group, and I really recommend that. That's a great place to be. And we try and post as often as we can things to keep your brains active. So those are sometimes little riddles, or they might be some guessing how many things are in the jar, or all sorts of things. We have lots of different things every day that we pop in there. The next habit then is eating for your brain. So again, some evidence base that tells us that eating the right things for our brain makes a big difference. So foods that are rich in vitamins and minerals are really good. Our brains need the right nutrients to function properly. And you probably know that your brain doesn't work particularly well when we don't feed it. I certainly, if I haven't had lunch and I try and deliver a training session in the afternoon, I can't find my words. So I know anecdotally that not eating food is not good for my brain, but actually the scientists have proven that one too. So there were two diets that have been proven to make a really big difference. And you may have heard them. The first one is the DASH diet, DASH, DASH diet. And this was designed to lower blood pressure. what the scientists found is that this had a positive effect on cognitive decline. So people's cognitive decline was slower on the DASH diet. And also they looked at the Mediterranean diet as well. Again, similar results on the Mediterranean diet. So what they did is they designed a diet that narrowed these two things that were allowed on these two diets and narrowed those down even further. They did an early study, and this was called the MIND diet, M-I-N-D, MIND diet. And the large-scale study, the early study they did was a small stage study, and this was great because it found that participants who stuck rigidly to the MIND diet were 52% less likely to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, which is pretty amazing. Now, they did a later study, which is a larger study, and in this one, those who stuck closely to the MIND diet had brains 8 years younger than those who didn't. Again, remarkable results. So the MIND diet is a really, really good one to follow, and actually it's a really easy one to follow, and it doesn't matter. The study showed this too, is that obviously the more rigidly you stick to it, the better results you have. But even those who didn't stick to it that much but kind of followed the rules still had good results, but not as good as the people who stuck to it rigidly. So I'm going to go over it really, really quickly. And if you caught my other webinar, my first webinar, you would have gone through all the ways to remember the foods that were good for your brain. And those all came from the MIND diet. So you may well recognize these and remember, because we did this memory thing to see if we could remember all of them by sticking them on different parts of our bodies. If you didn't do that one, look it up. It's good fun. So the 10 healthy foods then that you do eat, definitely eat on the MIND diet are olive oil, a glass of red wine a day, poultry, seafood, whole grains, beans, lentils and pulses, berries, nuts, vegetables. So green leafy vegetables, really, really good, like broccoli, kale, and then another vegetable on top of that as well. So you always have this one extra vegetable that you add to it. It's a really easy diet to stick to. And then the 5 unhealthy foods that you have to avoid are, but not entirely, you have to reduce or avoid, is red meat. There's very little red meat on the MIND diet. You can have butter, but it's a specific amount of butter a day, and it's plenty actually. Cheese, so you reduce the amount of cheese that you're going to eat, and of course fried and fast food, which is, you're going to expect that on any diet, I think, but actually it's a really lovely and easy diet to eat. So that is the MIND diet. Now, if you want more information on the MIND diet, or you want to be, you want to take the MIND diet really seriously and put some goals in place, then I would really recommend the Brain Fitness course, which helps you to put those things in place and then gives you the accountability as well to continue putting those in place. It takes 66 days to form a habit, so it does need a little bit of help, I think, from other people who are doing the same thing with you, and also you can have access to me on that as well. The next one then is stress. The reduction of stress, although we're going to look at when stress could be good for us as well. So if we can reduce stress, that will make a huge difference to our brains. Now, again, if I'm under stress, I find it really, really difficult to even think straight, and I think I'm not alone in that. So our brains do not do well at all under stress. Prolonged amount of stress means a prolonged amount of cortisol, which is the hormone that's released when we're under stress. Now, cortisol is great because it makes us incredibly alert, and it makes us be able to run away from those lions that are chasing us. So back when the stress response was very, very important for us in our survival, then cortisol was great. But nowadays, our lives really are not life-threatening in every day. But we still find that our stress response kicks in, you know, even when we're stressed about the roast dinner coming together, or the fact that we've got loads of people coming over and the house is untidy, or whatever it is that causes us stress. We're all completely different. But the fact is that the stress response is exactly the same. That cortisol is released. And cortisol, when it hangs around in our body, is really, really not good for us. So what it tends to do, or what it can do, is actually cause brain damage. So it causes damage to the neurons in our brain. Short bouts of cortisol, of course, are actually good for us, because if we are under stress, and our cortisol levels go up, then we will respond, and that usually means running away from the thing. And then, of course, the cortisol goes away again. Now, those short bouts of stress and those short peaks of cortisol are actually really good for our brains. And they have shown, I have to say this is in rats, mind, but they have shown in an experiment that when they stressed out rats for a short period of time, it caused them to grow new neurons. So we don't know if that happens in humans, and I'm always a little bit cautious with animal experiments, but it's interesting to know that's what happens. So the key thing is to get rid of that cortisol if you're under stress. So, of course, the best way to do that is to run, or do the things that you would have expected to do under those circumstances back in the caveman days. So run, walk, jog, get rid of the cortisol. Do things that make you happy. That's the other thing, is we always say that you can't have joy and fear in the same, well, I suppose you could, in the same space. I'm thinking about doing fairground rides. That's a bit of good stress. That would be that peak of cortisol that we give you, and then that feeling of absolute joyousness. But if you can do things that make you really happy, then this is really good for your brain. So things like writing a list of all the things that you're grateful for can completely lift your mood. And it's really difficult to be stressed about things when we're feeling happy. Our brains are hardwired to constantly look for threats. That's how human brains work. It's a survival mindset. And we have to actually work really hard to do something about that. And that's lots of mindset work that we can do. Be really aware of the thoughts that you let in to your brain. Try not to be a negative thinker, or notice when your thoughts are negative. And the other thing to do is to challenge your brain. Is this really something that's a massive threat to me? Should I really be afraid of this? Is it dangerous? Am I going to die at this moment in time? One more thing is to practice mindfulness and meditation. And it's completely change how your brain works. Just to be able to switch off those thoughts for a minute, to allow them to come into your head and then let them go without giving them any time of day, will make a massive difference. And if you can practice that for 15 minutes a day, you'll see that your stress will reduce. So that's stress. And then this is my final one. So this is number 6. The 6th habit is socialize. So you need to be socializing. And the reason that you need to be socializing is because that, again, is what is hardwired into our brains as humans. We are tribal beings. So we are hardwired to be sociable. We're hardwired to eat together, to be together. And when we're not, it has some quite catastrophic effects on our mental health. So 1 in 8 people in the UK are lonely. 1 in 8 people are lonely in the UK, and that's 1 in 5 in the United States of America. That's quite shocking. We're spending much more time alone. We're spending much more time online, and we're spending less time connected, actually physically connected with people. She says, whilst doing a webinar, I hope you feel connected. So the risk of isolation increases as we get older. That's a fact. So particularly as we retire and perhaps we're not working anymore, then we are much more isolated, and it increases as we get older. It happens quickly. So things like rates of illness go up when we're not connected. Long-term disease goes up. Cognitive decline and dementia can all be linked to being isolated, and isolation happens really quickly. You don't see it coming. You speak to somebody who's isolated and they didn't see it coming. And I think one of the things that we can teach in this habit is to become really aware and put things in place so we don't become isolated, because we're all at risk of it. So what can you do? Do things together. So even if you don't feel particularly sociable, it's so good for you to be sociable. Walk together, go out walking together, get outside, join a walking group, learn things together. So going to classes. So even if you're not particularly sociable and you don't like being in a sociable environment, going to a class or learning something together is a great way of doing it, because you're actually in sort of a time specified environment that will be over in the hour. Volunteer together is a great thing to do. And also, if you've got lots of skills, which I'm sure you have, then share them. Go and volunteer for a sports group if you're good at sport, or go and do some talks, or do some craft groups for you in your local community. There's all sorts of things that you can do with the things that you love to do, but do it with people. One top tip is to form a ritual, or 2 or 3. But if you have a ritual where you meet 3 or 4 friends on a Wednesday at 11 o'clock for coffee, and you always meet on a Wednesday at 11 o'clock for coffee, then that is very likely to continue. When we do ad hoc meetings, social ad hoc meetings, very often we don't stick to it, or we move it, or we say we'll do it in a week or so's time, and it doesn't take long to become disconnected. So create those rituals. Talk to people on the bus, if you go on the bus, or on the train, or in a waiting space. Again, there are lots of opportunities for us to connect with people, and we often don't, maybe because we're shy, but it doesn't, particularly us British, it doesn't come naturally to us to spark up a conversation. But I would really recommend that you did. And one more is to do random acts of kindness. Is there something that you can do that's kind? You don't even need to tell anybody that you've done it, but do random acts of kindness. It can lift your mood, but also really help you feel connected in human terms with people. So that is number 6, socialize. So let's just recap for a second. So we talked about sleep, getting good sleep. It was number 1. First habit is get good sleep. And you can do that tonight. So stop eating chocolate and drinking coffee just before you go to bed. Get your routine in place and sleep well. You should be getting 8 hours of sleep a night. It's between 7 and 9 hours, so definitely no less than 7. Exercise your body was the next one. So exercise your body, get out, move around, do some balance exercises. Remember, you should be doing 75 minutes of vigorous activity or 150 minutes of moderate aerobic activity per day. The next one is exercise your brain. So get thinking, learn new things, do those quizzes, join our Facebook group and come in there and have a lot of fun and do some quizzes with us. Eat is the next thing, so eating the right thing. So have a look at the Mind Diet. You can do a Google and find out about the Mind Diet if you want to. If you would like more help in embedding the Mind Diet, then do join our course. And the last one, no, it's not. Penultimate one is stress. And the last one is to socialize. So try and put things in place so you do not become isolated. And we're all at risk of that. So all of these habits will make a big difference to your brain health. And I was hoping to get all this done in half an hour, and I've just managed it 29 minutes past. So if you want to learn more about all of this and in more depth, then I would really highly recommend that you join our group, the Brain Fitness Formula community. And in there, we would help you embed all these habits. So actually, there's much longer presentations. There's there's worksheets, there's access to in-depth video presentations, goal setting. We've got all the worksheets which I've put together which help you to set those specific goals. So what's great about that is when I'm doing a quick webinar, it's quite difficult obviously for me to know what you're already doing. But let's say that you're really already running all over the place, but you have difficulty in terms of socializing, or perhaps you're really sociable, but you need more help with the brain fitness part, the exercising the brain part. Then what this does is this really hones down to the things that you really need to look at so that you can set goals that are going to work for you. And you also have the ability to be sociable and help other people in the group to set their goals as well. So there's accountability, and I really like that, because I know that when I decide that I'm going to make a different choice in my life, then it takes 66 days, and those 66 days actually I'm great for the first couple of weeks, and then I start forgetting to do it or moving it aside, and then before we know it I'm not doing it anymore. And I think what's great about being in the group is that you're accountable, so people can check up and see, have you done it, did you do it today? Or you can tell people that you're finding it difficult and get cheered on as well. You have access to me in the group as well, which is brilliant, maybe if you like me, and I will help you too in terms of setting those goals and helping you out. And you can go at your own pace. So it's a 6-week course, but you don't have to do it in 6 weeks. You can do it in 12, or you can take 24 if you want to. As long as you're making progress through the groups, then you will get results out of it. The fact is that Memory Matters is a non-profit organisation, but the idea is that all of the profits that we make from our training go towards helping people living with dementia in the community, and that's the bread and butter. That's what we're trying to do here, is to create an environment where people living with dementia can access all of the skills that we're able to give, and that includes day clubs in the community. It includes drop-in and help for carers and people living with dementia who are struggling. So it's really important that our courses that we provide bring in some money to help us to do that. I'm going to put the link at the bottom so that you can click on it if you want to, and that will give you access to a whole 6-week course, and you've got access to it forever. And there's a money back guarantee, so you think it's rubbish, you can you can tell us and we'll give you your money back. So that's great. So I'll put the link at the bottom. It would be lovely if you joined us, and it would be lovely if you loved it, if you told your friends as well. If you want to get in now. Okay, lovely to meet you all. Thank you for those of you that are here. I'm sorry I haven't managed to type as well as talk. So lovely to see you. Thank you for coming. Bye.